A startling admission by the ex-president that could very well end up being a critical piece of evidence in the cases against him. We're talking about newly released audio of an interview with Donald Trump by ABC News' Jon Karl. It took place a little more than 2 months after the January 6th insurrection. It shows the ex-president knew full well the power he had over the mob that stormed the Capitol. Just take a listen.
But if you look at the real size of that crowd, it was never reported correctly. It's the biggest crowd I've ever spoken in front of by far.
Really?
By far. That went down to that went back to the Washington Monument.
You told them you were going to go up to the Capitol. Were you just...
I was going to, and the Secret Service said, you can't. And then by the time I would have, and then when I got back, I wanted to go back. I was thinking about going back during the problem to stop the problem, doing it myself. Secret Service didn't like that idea too much. I could have done that, and you know what? I would have been very well received. Don't forget, the people that went to Washington that day, in my opinion, they went because they thought the election was rigged. That's why they went.
Trump's desire to go to the Capitol was fleshed out in incredible detail by the January 6th Select Committee. White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified that Trump was irate when the Secret Service said he could not go to the Capitol.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
Think about it. If Donald Trump felt comfortable joining a mob that he reportedly knew was armed to the teeth, it was because he knew that they were there because of him. Here's January 6th rioter Stephen Ayers.
I was hanging on every word he was saying. Everything he was putting out, I was following it. I mean, if I was doing it, hundreds of thousands or millions of other people are doing it, or maybe even still doing it.
So if the former president would have been, quote, well received by the rioters, as he himself put it, it follows that he could have called off the mob. Instead, what happened was what the January 6th Select Committee called 187 minutes of dereliction. 187 minutes after his speech at the Ellipse to the White House, he posted a video on Twitter calling for the mob to go home, during which Trump did nothing to stop the violence. The comments, a reminder of how the brutal violence at the Capitol is an integral part of the story of January 6th and an integral part of the criminal case against Donald Trump. The judge overseeing the federal election interference case weighing in on this very issue today. Judge Tanya Chutkan rejecting Trump's bid to get references to the riot removed from Jack Smith's indictment. And breaking in just the last hour, Speaker Mike Johnson announcing that security footage of the January 6th attack will be made available to the public. That includes footage that was given to then Fox News host Tucker Carlson by Speaker Kevin McCarthy earlier this year. And boy, is there a lot, is where we start this hour with former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy, and with me at the table, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin and Molly Jong-Fast, host of the podcast Fast Politics, as well as a special correspondent for Vanity Fair. Tim, I want to start with you. Your committee, you poured through this footage. You took steps to make sure that the footage didn't disclose sensitive security information. Your reaction to Speaker Johnson's move today?
Yeah, it's dangerous. You know, the Capitol Police gave it to us, Alicia, with really strict conditions that we needed to clear with them before we publicly showed any of that footage. Now, it's relevant because it demonstrates some events in and around the Capitol. There are security cameras posted all over the complex, but the specific location of those cameras is closely held law enforcement sensitive information. And if they're all disclosed and a map can essentially be recreated as to where they are, that will make it easier for future rioters who are intent on disrupting another joint session of Congress or official proceeding to circumvent those cameras. So it's really risky to just throw the doors open and make them together without any protection.
Right. There's the logistical piece of it, Molly. There's also the fact that just this week you had a Republican congressman peddling conspiracy theories about what actually happened on January 6th, trying to argue that the FBI was involved in January 6th. You take this footage and you put it in the hands of bad actors. Who knows where it goes?
Well, and I think it's a bit weird that Mike Johnson is doing this. He's recently become the Speaker of the House, right? He was a sort of consensus candidate when they kind of panicked after 3 weeks of Republicans not having a speaker. And also, he recently endorsed Donald Trump. So you have to wonder, is he doing this as like a campaign stunt, or is he doing this in his job as Speaker of the House?
Right. This is not actually about governing and doing things. A good question about motivation. I love that you brought legal documents for us to answer the question that you knew I would have about how this becomes, these claims from Donald Trump become legally debunked.
I think the claims become legally debunked because of the 187 minutes. Let's start there. So on this tape with Jon Karl, Donald Trump is saying he could have stopped it. And yet, Alicia, the evidence is as clear as day that he didn't do anything to stop that through his communications with anyone on the Hill or otherwise from the White House. When he says, I wanted to go there, yes, we all know he wanted to go there. And to Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, are we really supposed to believe that a person who would reach up and throttle his own Secret Service agent would then go there in peace a couple of hours later to try to dissuade his supporters from tearing up the Capitol? I don't think so. And I don't think a jury would buy that either.
I want to ask you, Lisa, break down Judge Chutkan's ruling for us.
I think Judge Chutkan's ruling is incredibly important, but not necessarily for the reasons that people think. You might say, well, why does it matter what's actually in the indictment itself, particularly if the jurors are not going to walk away, and I'm holding the indictment, if they're not going to walk away with this document in their hands during deliberations. It matters because that's still fair game for the prosecutors to prove, and as we know from a political article recently, that's the centerpiece of Jack Smith and his team's case. They want to put January 6th at the center of Donald Trump's efforts to obstruct the official proceeding. And there's a whole section of the indictment that's about his exploitation of the violence and the chaos. It's not just his inaction. It's about how he laid the groundwork for that chaos and then exploited it. Tweeting about Mike Pence at 2:24, as the indictment says, a minute before he has to be evacuated. The cause and effect is clear in the indictment, and now prosecutors can make that a central part of their presentation.
Judge Chutkan says Trump's filing makes, quote, numerous inflammatory and unsupported accusations of its own. Why do you think she felt the need to write that?
I think she's trying to show that Trump is using his filings for political theater as much as he is using it to mount a legal defense, if not more so. And I think that's offensive to her. We're seeing that in the New York case as well, where there's this sort of Pee Wee Herman, I know you are, but what am I thing going on, right? And she's calling him on it. Your filing, just as you're saying that these allegations need to be stricken because they are inflammatory, your filing is more inflammatory than anything they've said about you. You are trying to ratchet this up. You are endangering people through your rhetoric, which you call your defense.
Which we have seen time and time again. Tim, Jack Smith said Trump's bid to strike references to the violence from the indictment was a, quote, meritless effort to evade the indictment's clear allegations that the defendant is responsible for the events at the Capitol on January 6th. Talk to us. Lisa touched on it. I want to tease it out more. Why the violence on the 6th matters in terms of Donald Trump's criminal exposure.
Because they're the ultimate manifestation of his attempt to disrupt the joint session. He's charged specifically with intent to disrupt an official proceeding. The violence is what interrupts the official proceeding. It is the logical last step of his intentional multi-part plan to prevent the transfer of power. That is the theory that the special counsel has charged. And this notion that you should somehow separate the violence at the Capitol because he isn't technically charged with assaulting a police officer like a lot of the people who have been charged is crazy, because again, you can only understand what happened at the Capitol as the logical last step of a desperate plan. Judge Chutkan logically saw through that. There's no way to try this case, this conspiracy case, without reference to the violence. And his intent all along is made manifest by his inaction over the course of those 187 minutes. This notion that he told Jon Karl, I could have gone down there and stopped it, completely inconsistent with the consistent body of evidence we heard from people inside the White House who said He didn't do anything. He could have picked up his phone and tweeted to stop, and he did not. To the contrary, he resisted those efforts from his daughter, from his chief of staff, from his White House counsel. He sat there and watched TV in the dining room as people brawled, as somebody was killed. And for him now to say, I could have gone down there and stopped it, it just belies the consistent body of evidence that we developed that Jack Smith will present in court.
What do you make of his saying he thinks he would have been well received by the rioters?
You know, for Trump, there's so much ego. And you even saw, I mean, he's talking about a riot, and he's like, it's a huge crowd. It was
He's
the
still
biggest
arguing over crowd size.
Right. I mean, and so I do think ultimately he can't help himself. You know, he tends to confess things as a sort of point of pride. We saw him politicize, you know, these court hearings. He sometimes does the wrong thing, even not the politically smart thing. So I do think that we'll see more of this kind of braggadociousness.